semester. So we'll have a we'll have a fall and winter seasonal vegetable class in November, and then we'll do holiday treats in December. So you can sign up for those online. All the classes are hybrid, but today the focus is cooking on a budget because, as you know, over the last couple of years, food prices are going up, there's inflation, and most of us just want to save money all the time, right? So I'm going to feature a few really affordable ingredients and show you how to make some hopefully tasty recipes out of them. It's also Zero Waste October, so I'm going to try to throw in some tips to reduce waste in the kitchen. So let's get started. The first recipe we're going to make are the beans. They're called frijoles colombianos. It's a Colombian bean recipe. It's from a cookbook called Provecho by Edgar Castrejón. And this is, according to the cookbook, a recipe that's used at a lot of parties. So it's a good party dish, serves a lot of people, pretty tasty, easy, and affordable to make. So what we're going to do is it's going to be beans plus some seasonings and some vegetables and actually plantains. So the first thing we're going to do is cut up the onion, and we're going to cook this in a big pot. You can cook it in a saucepan about this size, but it will be really full. So I prefer to cook it in a stock pot or like a Dutch oven. So first we're gonna cut up the onion. So it calls for 1 large onion, diced in 1/2-inch pieces. This is gonna be my compost bowl. Compost, another good way to reduce waste. Food waste releases a lot of methane in landfills, but if you compost it, it does the opposite. It actually can help with reducing carbon emissions and all those valuable nutrients that are in food scraps can get recycled into the planet rather than just rotting away in landfills. So definitely recommend composting, especially if you live somewhere where they have curbside pickup, or you can do home composting. So I'm just gonna chop up the onion into about 1/2-inch pieces, maybe a little bit smaller. And I'm using white onion, which is what the recipe calls for, but I think, yellow onions are pretty similar, so if that's what you have, that should be fine too. And something that I find helpful is that I stick the onion in the fridge for a little bit before I chop it, and that seems to reduce the gases that make you cry. So that's what works for me. You can try goggles. I don't know if that actually works, but that's my favorite way to do it. Okay, so we're going to preheat our pot, and we want to use a neutral flavored cooking oil. So I'm using canola oil, but you can use sunflower, safflower. Grapeseed tastes a little bit like olive oil, so there's a little bit of flavor, but it should be okay in a recipe like this. There's still a lot of other flavor. And we're going to add 2 tablespoons. Okay. Let that heat up. Meanwhile, we can start on our other vegetables. So another zero waste tip, of course, is using reusable produce bags. So I bought everything in here, but I set them aside because I already washed everything. And we're going to use potatoes and plantains and tomatoes. So for the potatoes, it calls for the recipe says 2 small russet potatoes, and this was like the smallest potato I could find, and it was 6 ounces just for one. So I just bought 1 small potato. I've also made this dish with way more potatoes, and it's still tasty. So do whatever you want with that. But yeah, we're going to use 1 russet potato. We're also going to use 1 plantain. So plantains are actually ripe when they're almost black all over, so kind of different from bananas. Plantains are like bananas, but they're starchier, so they work better in like savory applications. Of course, you make them sweet too, but they also work well for cooking. Like this is sort of like a stew, so you're cooking it for a long time. So it's nice to have something that holds up to that. Plus bananas, and this might be a little too sweet and mushy anyway. But yeah, plantains are great for cooking. You can peel the potato if you want, but I'm just going to leave the skin on, which is how I did it for the samples that you're eating now. So we're going to cut the potato into 1/2-inch cubes. So pretty much everything we're doing here is 1/2-inch cubes. You know, if I just want everything bite-sized and easy to eat. Just little cubes here. We're going to cook the onions first, so I'm going to set those aside. Usually, most recipes, you cook the onions for a little bit first because they will sort of flavor the oil. It's getting hot. Is it getting hot? Not yet. Okay, we'll give it a minute. We got a backup burner too, so we'll see if this one works better. Okay, anyway, let's continue chopping our vegetables. So I think you could throw in, you know, other ingredients if you'd like, or other veggies, but I'm just following the recipe on this one. Trying to keep it somewhat traditional. Okay, let's check the pot. I think it's not turning on. Oh, that got switched off. That's why. Okay, we're good. Let me get new gloves.
We should start the energies.
Yeah. It's a green event.
Yeah.
So while we're doing this, what do you all think of the recipes so far? Thank you.
Ask about the banana again.
Yeah.
About using bananas.
What was that?
Would it be okay to use banana instead of a plantain?
I think it might taste a little funny because the bananas are much sweeter and have a stronger banana flavor. I think plantains taste a little bit more mild, so they mix better into flavor applications. So I'd probably leave it out if you can't find plantains.
And would the banana break down a little bit?
Yeah, it would also get pretty mushy.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah, so I'd maybe just add more potato or some other vegetable. Okay, that is heating up, but I'm gonna get a little bit warmer before I add the onion. I liked it to sizzle a little bit. That helps get it nice and like crisp and caramelized rather than steaming from the pan not being hot enough. Okay, so let's cut up everything else. So again, you don't actually want a ripe plantain for this recipe because it'll be too mushy, but you could use ripe plantains for other recipes like, you know, fried plantains. For this one, we want one that's less ripe, so actually light green or pale yellow is what we're looking for. So plantains are a lot harder to peel than bananas. The peel is really fibrous. So what I usually do is just kind of run a knife along the outside and then peel it. If it's really unripe, the peel might stick, so it can be a little bit trickier, but these ones I think are just right, fortunately. And then we're also going to cut this into 1/2-inch cubes. So I'm just going to cut it down the middle, basically going to quarter it. So if you're not familiar with plantains, you can see it's pretty similar to a banana, but it's kind of like a little bit orange on the inside. I don't know if you can see that on the overhead camera. And yeah, more firm because it's starchier. And I think haven't had trouble finding plantains at grocery stores. Maybe not all stores have them, but hopefully you can find them if you want to try making this recipe. Okay, that pot is hot, so let's add our onion. There we go, one little sizzle there.
Yeah. I was talking about cookware, but.
Uh-huh.
So, was there oil in that when you were heating up?
Yeah. So there's 2 tablespoons of oil in the pot. Yeah. That will help the onions cook and help prevent everything from sticking, especially potatoes. Probably the plantains too, they're starchy. So So starchy things can stick really easily in cans if there's not oil or water or something in there already.
I was thinking more for the cookware, I heard not to heat cookware without, like, dry heat it, if possible, because it might, I mean, but it depends on the cookware, of course, but.
Yeah, so non-stick cookware, you don't want to heat it with nothing in it. Basically, you don't want to overheat non-stick cookware because it depends on the type, but it just might make it break down or and not be as effective. But if it's Teflon, it can actually release other things that I guess are toxic to birds and maybe not great for us either. Um, so you want to be especially careful with non-stick. So you can, I think, preheat it a little bit with nothing in it, but definitely don't leave it unattended. And then once there's food in it, it's a little harder to overheat, but of course still possible. You want to make sure, your food check the temperature. Okay, so we are also adding tomato in this recipe, so it calls for 2 Roma tomatoes. I think other tomatoes are fine too, but Roma seems to be a little bit more firm, so I think they hold their shape a little bit better. So you can kind of see them in the recipe, but of course they're going to break down quite a bit, and that kind of helps thicken it, so that works too. So to mention nutrition a little bit, we've got a few different ingredients here that all work together pretty nicely because we have beans, which have protein and fiber and iron. And sometimes, especially if you follow a plant-based diet, it's a little bit harder to find iron sources, but it's actually not that hard. But if you combine a plant-based iron with vitamin C, it actually helps you absorb it because plant-based iron is not as efficiently absorbed as animal-based iron, like the iron that's in, red meat. But fortunately, most fruits and vegetables have some vitamin C, so it's really not hard to get enough. And something else you can do is actually, I'm going to turn the heat down a little bit so it doesn't burn. Cooking in cast iron will help add iron to your food as well. So in this case, we're getting vitamin C from the tomatoes. So there's also vitamin C in, what fish do you think of with vitamin C? What was it? Oranges? Yeah, definitely oranges and citrus. That's what we think of commonly. But there's actually a lot of foods that have just as much, if not more, vitamin C than oranges, like bell peppers, for example, especially the red ones. Strawberries, tomatoes, so not too hard to find. So we're gonna let that cook for 5 or 6 minutes just until it starts to get a little translucent and brown a bit. Let's see. Okay, let's get out the beans. So we're gonna use 2 cans of beans. Of course, you can use beans that you cook from scratch as well. That'll probably be even richer and more flavorful, but I'm just gonna show you canned beans because that's a bit easier. And if you do cook beans from scratch, you can even find places that sell them in bulk, so you can bring your own container, or you can use a bag like this, and then you have pretty much no waste. So another 0 waste tip, but I'm using cans which are recyclable, so that's okay too. So the type of beans that I'm using, the type of beans traditionally used in Colombia are called cargamanto. They might be a little hard to find here. Did I see them practical? I don't think I saw them, but these are similar. These are called borlotti beans. I think they're from Italy, which are very similar, if not the same, as cranberry beans, which maybe you've seen. When they're dry, they're kind of pretty. They're like white and red. You can actually find them at farmers markets around here, fresh, but that's a lot of work to prepare and cook them. But you could use cranberry or these borlotti beans. If not, you can just use, pinto beans or some other kind of red beans. In this recipe, he actually uses black beans, but I kind of like the lighter colored beans in particular for this one. So next we're going to add the potatoes. This is starting to brown a tiny bit, but I'm going to let it go a little bit further. So actually potatoes have vitamin C. They also have potassium. So again, the vitamin C in the potatoes and the tomatoes, and actually plantains. That all helps you absorb the iron from the beans. Potatoes and the plantains are sources of potassium. What foods do you think of when you think potassium? Yeah, bananas.
Avocado.
So actually, a lot of fruits and vegetables have small amounts of potassium. I think one banana has like 10% of the daily value. So there aren't a lot of foods that you could eat one or two of and be set for the day for potassium. And we actually need quite a bit of potassium. It's something like 4,800 milligrams, which is like almost 5 grams. Whereas, vitamin C, I think the recommendation is like 70 milligrams. So teeny tiny amounts. So it's actually kind of hard to get enough potassium. So I think kind of the best way to do it is to just eat a wide variety of fruits and vegetables, because then each one is going to have some and it adds up. So one plantain has about 25% of the daily value, which is pretty good. But in this recipe, this serves about 6. So that's only about 4 to 6% of the daily value in one serving. So you can see how it's, you kind of have to make sure you get a lot of sources to make sure that you get enough. And potassium is good for blood pressure. It kind of helps balance out the sodium. All right, so those are browning a little bit. I think I turned the heat down a little too low. I'm going to turn it up a little bit, and then we're going to add the potatoes. So tomatoes, again, have vitamin C. My tip for storage is to store them at room temperature. They actually get kind of mealy and lose their flavor in the refrigerator. But if you have some tomatoes on your countertop that you want to use tomorrow and they're starting to look a little soft, you might be better off throwing them in the fridge just so that they last. So, kind of depends on the context. But in general, they do better at room temperature. Potatoes, you want to store in a cool, well-ventilated space. And they actually don't mix well with onions. So I've had to keep my onions in one cabinet and the potatoes in the other, because I think they kind of make each other spoil, or one makes the other spoil, I forget. But anyway, yeah, onions you also want to store in a cool, dark place. Plantains, so I mentioned the potassium, they also have vitamin C, vitamin B6, and fiber, 4 grams in one plantain. So generally, plant foods have a lot of fiber. Beans have a lot. These beans in particular, let's see, half cup has 7 grams. And most people need 25 to 35 grams in a day. So beans are a really good source, especially they're an especially good source of soluble fiber, which can help lower your LDL cholesterol. Because the soluble fiber kind of it's like a gel. It sucks up the cholesterol and carries it out of your body. Whereas insoluble fiber doesn't get digested, but it's still helpful. It helps bulk up stool for regular bowel movements and whatnot. So anyway, let's add our potatoes. And so we're just going to throw these in, cook them for a few minutes until they start to brown, and then we're going to throw pretty much everything else in at once. Give that a stir.
Back another question.
Yeah.
So if you can't get potassium from I guess produce sources, where do people get rest of their potassium?
There's some in dairy, but supplementation is a little tricky. I don't know if anybody's ever needed a potassium supplement. They're like a giant pill, and they're usually by prescription only. So really, I think, I'm not sure how much is in dairy, but I think fruits and vegetables are best.
Potassium is the K, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, K is the element. Yeah. I don't know, some foods might be fortified. Yeah, like this, I'm using oat milk. And since it's kind of a dairy replacement, oftentimes plant milks are fortified with nutrients that you would find in milk, like vitamin D or vitamin A. So this one has 400 milligrams of potassium per cup, which is 8% daily value. It also has calcium added, vitamin A, B2, and B12. B12 is, especially since we're talking about all plant-based recipes, B12 is mostly found in animal sources. So for people who don't really eat animal products or don't eat a lot, that can be a nutrient to watch out for. So you can actually find it in nutritional yeast, which I sometimes use in recipes that don't have cheese. It kind of gives it a cheesy flavor and it's nutritious and tasty. Or foods that might be fortified with it, like plant milks. Okay, so we got the beans. We're also going to add some spices and some broth. So I might actually need to borrow the water pitcher from the back in a minute, but for now we're okay. So for spices, we've got cumin, smoked paprika, and garlic powder. So another zero waste tip is you can buy spices in bulk at some stores like Sprouts, I think Rainbow Grocery or Berkeley Bowl, but some stores, they don't let you use your own containers. But Berkeley Bowl in particular, you can bring your own container. They weigh it before, and then you fill it up. You can bring your own funnel if you want, or they have ones you can borrow. And then you weigh it after, and they only charge you for, obviously, the weight of what you bought. So I like it because then you get your spices in cute jars, and there's something kind of fun and old-fashioned about it. And you can reuse jars, and it's way cheaper. So I think, I already used some of these spices. I didn't fill them all up because I don't need that much of them, but I think all three of these together cost me less than $2. So for example, this garlic, I filled it almost all the way to the top, and it was $1.15. So I think if you bought a whole container, how much does that cost? I haven't bought one in so long. $6, yeah. So you can save a lot of money, especially on the dried herbs, because they weigh like nothing. So you could probably I think I filled these things up for 80 cents or something with dried herbs. So you can save some money too while you're at it, which is nice. Or if it's a spice where you don't need a lot of it, you just need a little bit for one recipe, and you don't want to waste a lot, then that's a good way to not waste money. But if you don't put enough in the jar, it won't really register. So, you might have to do more than a teaspoon or two, but it's still going to be really affordable. Okay, so we got the potatoes in. I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit more so they can start to brown. And I'm just going to measure the spices into a bowl so we can just toss it all in at once. Okay, so we are going to use 2 teaspoons of cumin. Okay, so I already used 2 teaspoons, but yeah, this was 45 cents. Okay, 2 teaspoons. Yeah, I think these spices kind of give it a nice smoky flavor between the cumin and the smoked paprika. So we need 2 teaspoons of garlic powder. Oh, didn't quite fit. 1, 2, and then 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika. For plant-based cooking, if you are making something that would normally have something smoky in it, like bacon, smoked paprika is a nice way to get a little extra smoky flavor in it. We did a recipe, I forget if it was last fall or this spring, but it was, this might sound funny, but it was rice paper bacon. So you actually take rice paper that you would use to make spring rolls, and you make a marinade with different spices, and I think there's like soy sauce and some other stuff in there, and the smoked paprika is used there, which also kind of gives it that red color and gives a little bit of a smoky flavor. I'm not going to add any salt yet. I'm going to do that to taste because we're adding broth. So depending on the saltiness of your broth and your beans, you probably want to salt it to taste. For the broth, I'm using one of my favorite products ever. This is a bouillon paste. This one is vegetarian, no chicken broth. There's also a vegetable broth, which you can buy in cubes, in a jar, or in the carton. But I find that the ones called no chicken broth taste so much better to me for some reason. And they're not as like dark brown, orangey colored. So I love this stuff. It's also pretty economical. The one jar is kind of expensive. They're like $6 or so, but 1 teaspoon of this is equivalent to 1 bouillon cube or 8 ounces of broth. And there are 38 1 teaspoon servings in here. So that means this little jar is equivalent to 38 cups of broth, which is almost 9 quarts. So it also just lasts longer. You know, often when you buy the quart of broth, oftentimes you don't use the whole thing and then it just goes bad anyway. So, and then it's in a recyclable jar. So big fan of that. Or you can even make your own broth. So one way to do that is just save vegetable scraps. If you have enough from, you know, one day, then you could go ahead and use them. But if not, you could keep it in the fridge. Just keep like a baggie or a container of vegetable scraps in the fridge or even the freezer. And when you have enough, and if you know, have chicken or something, you can throw that in, but you don't have to. Once you have enough, then you just cook in a big pot of water and you have homemade broth. So things that you might want to put in there would be like the onion skins and ends, the paper or leftovers from garlic, carrot peels and stems, yeah, all kinds of peels and stems. I just wouldn't add too much of things like cabbage leaves, cauliflower stems, broccoli stems. A little bit's okay, but I think too much has a funny flavor. So it's better to get more of the flavor from those aromatics like the onion and garlic, or leeks would be really good.
You use potato peelings or is that a flavor?
I think maybe a little bit, but I think it might make it would bring out the starch and might kind of thicken it, make it might be a little slimy. Okay, so we're throwing everything else in. I drained 1 can of beans, and then the other one we're just going to throw everything in with the bean liquid, and that's going to kind of help thicken it. But I've also made it when I drained both cans, and I just added a little extra water. So you can try either way. And then we're going to do 1 cup of broth. So when you use the bouillon paste, you use, to make 1 cup of broth, you add 1 cup of water and 1 teaspoon of the bouillon paste. Yeah, they have all kinds of bouillon paste. There's like mushroom broth. I saw at the store they have lobster broth, they have pork, chicken, but they have all kinds of plant-based ones too, if that's your preference. Okay, let's see. And then we're going to add our spices here. And again, I'm going to wait to add salt to taste once that broth gets mixed in there. And the salt from the 1 can of beans I didn't drain, it might be enough. You might not need the full teaspoon that the recipe calls for. So I don't know if you can see that now. It's just kind of watery, but we're going to let it cook for about 25 minutes. Maybe a little less because we don't have time. And you'll see that it's going to thicken, kind of like your sample. Your samples are a little thick because they've been sitting out for a little while already. Little spices stuck in there. Okay. So now we're just going to cover it, simmer it for a while, and move on to the next recipe. So the next recipe, one other thing I want to add, this recipe is typically made with pork, but this is a plant-based version. In fact, the cookbook I got it from is all plant-based. Okay, so let's move on to our carrot cake oatmeal. So if you like oatmeal, and you maybe have a certain way that you cook it, this hopefully is a different idea for you if you want to try something new. And it's a way to get vegetables in the morning. So sometimes that can be tricky, but this 1 serving of this oatmeal already has a serving of vegetables in it. So that's a pretty good start for the day. So it calls for half a cup of carrots, grated carrots, which might be 1 carrot or maybe 1.5 carrots or so, but you also don't really have to measure it exactly. It's just oatmeal, so you can change out the ingredients or quantities if you want. But I'm just gonna go ahead and peel 2. And then we're gonna add some other things to add flavor and crunch and nutrition. So we are adding raisins, which are kind of traditional in carrot cake, but you know, if you hate raisins, you can just leave them out or throw in dried cranberries or blueberries or whatever you like better. And walnuts, and then some spices. So we want grated carrots, so you could use like a box grater if you have one. You could use the food processor, or you can even just buy them like already grated. But I actually have this julienne peeler. So it actually, I don't know if you can see that, but yeah, you just pull it down. So it's kind of like a regular peeler, but then it has this jagged edge, so it creates shreds for you. So very handy. So the way that I like to do it, I don't want the carrots to be super long because they're kind of hard to eat. So I just start by grating like a half or a third of the carrot, and then that might break off. Sometimes you end up with these pieces, which you could just chop up or save it for your homemade vegetable broth. Or give it to your dog. That's what I usually do. So, of course, carrots are very nutritious as well. And one serving has about half a day's worth of vitamin A, which is good for protecting your eyes. Not gonna, make your vision better or anything, but it helps preserve your eye health, so that's always good. And that vitamin A is an antioxidant, or the beta carotene is an antioxidant. So that can help or may help prevent macular degeneration, reduce inflammation, and risk of heart disease. Okay, so we want, what did I say, half a cup. So I'm just going to do a little bit more. Yeah, I also use this peeler. Sometimes I'll do like cucumbers or zucchini. Something that I made the other day was a green papaya salad, like a Thai green papaya salad, and I use this to shred up the papaya. So you can use it in all kinds of different recipes. All right, let's check on the beans real quick, make sure that they're kind of simmering away. Oh, turn the heat down a little bit too much. Okay. And then we're gonna cook the oatmeal over here. So this cooks pretty quickly. Rolled oats don't take a long time to cook, about 5 minutes or so. Instant oats are even faster. Steel cut oats, of course, take a bit longer, like 30 something minutes. So, but if you prefer that texture, then that's fine too. I would just add the other ingredients later in the cooking process. So I'm going to cook the oatmeal in oat milk to make it creamier. You could also use water or any other milk of your choice. Or you can make your own oat milk if you feel so inclined. So we do have that recipe on our website as well. Basically, what you do to make your own oat milk is you take rolled oats like this, not steel cut or instant. And I think the ratio I usually use is 1 cup of oats to 3 cups of water. And you just pure it or process it in a high-powered blender. And then you want to strain it. So you could use a cheesecloth or a thin dish towel or even a clean t-shirt, maybe one that you don't care too much about. It doesn't stain it, but might make it a little funky. And you squeeze out all the water, and you're left with like flaky little bits of oats, which you could then cook, and the texture will be similar to an instant oatmeal. So, there's not really any waste with that. Or you could save it and add it to a smoothie or maybe bake something with it. So what we're going to do is bring the oat milk to a boil. The thing about homemade oat milk is, as you can see with oats, they can get a little, I don't want to say slimy, but that's kind of like part of the texture of oatmeal, right? So with the homemade oat milk, I wouldn't recommend using it in something like, I probably wouldn't use it in coffee, because when you heat it, it's kind of like the same thing that you're doing when you cook oats. But the store-bought kind doesn't do that because they actually process it a little bit more. But the homemade oat milk is great for cereal or smoothies or baking. So there's lots of ways you can use it, and it's really affordable to make since we're talking about cooking on a budget. I also bought my oats in a reusable container, so there's no waste, and it's a nice, easy-to-use jar. It's just like an old nut jar that I saved. So that can help you reduce waste too. And we're gonna throw in the carrots, oats, and raisins all at the same time, because that will help soften the carrots a little bit. I like to add the raisins earlier on so they get a little bit nice and plump and infused with flavor, but you can also add them at the end if that's your preference. And so I'm just gonna get it all measured into the bowl, and then we can throw it in all at once. So we need, for one serving, it's one pretty big serving, so you can see when it's done how much it is. You could probably split it into two. You can also double, triple the recipe. If you make oatmeal like this ahead of time, when you go to reheat it, I would just add a little bit more liquid, so it's gonna kind of thicken up over time. Okay, so then we need, I think, 2 tablespoons of raisins. I'm just gonna eyeball it. You know, again, the quantities don't have to be exact, and you can swap things out. We'll measure the carrots just to see. So we need half a cup, about that much. So a little bit too much, so we'll put that there. And we'll toss that in when we're ready. And then we're going to use walnuts. I have some walnuts. Actually, so at Berkeley Bowl, I got these in bulk. I was short by 1 jar. They don't use plastic anymore, so everything is in paper bags. Or the bigger bags are compostable there. So if you do forget your own jars, then they have this available. These walnuts I bought were a little old, so I'm just going to leave them out. And then we're going to add a pinch of salt, which you can leave out, but I feel like it just helps enhance the flavor of everything when you add a little bit of salt. We're going to add some maple syrup for a little sweetness. Of course, you can customize the quantity to your preference. I like maple syrup because it gives it that maple-y flavor. But you can use other sweetener if you prefer. And then we're going to add some cinnamon. But I recommend if you have these other spices and you like them to add some other spices to pick it up a little bit. So what I did in your samples was I added a little bit of vanilla extract, which makes it a little bit more decadent, I think. And then I just happen to have these other ones at home and I rarely use them. So I brought ground ginger, allspice, and nutmeg. So I would maybe do like a pinch of each, and then you can adjust it to your taste. So I added, yeah, probably a pretty healthy sized pinch of each of these in your samples. And I think I added also a little bit extra cinnamon too. When I added a full teaspoon of cinnamon, the liquidy part of the oatmeal was really dark. So I think 1 teaspoon might be a little bit too much, but maybe somewhere between half and 3/4. So for the nuts, if they're not in pieces already, I'll just give them a little rough chop. But I'm just going to skip that for our demonstration. Let's check on everything else. Okay, I'm going to turn the heat up on this. Oh, I think, is this still on? I think this extension cord is automatically turning off, so I think that's one of the issue. But fortunately, the cup of oat milk will blow very quickly. Okay, so back to the oatmeal. So we talked about the carrots, and then of course we have the oats. We talked about the soluble fiber and how it's good for your LDL cholesterol. And then the nuts add, of course, the crunch and the texture, but also some protein and healthy fats. Okay, now we're cooking. You can see that steaming. Okay, it's probably gonna need a minute. That might just be something burnt onto the the burner actually, but okay, we'll leave that for a minute. What else? So again, boil the liquid, whatever kind of liquid you want to use. Throw in the carrots, raisins, and oat salt once. Cook it for about 5 minutes, but you can also adjust the time based on your preference. I think the stove that I used was a little bit weak, so I ended up cooking it more like 6 or 7 to get it nice and well combined. And then at the end, just add everything else. So we can get our spices measured. So we want half a teaspoon of cinnamon. That's this one. I'm going to do a heaping half teaspoon, give a little extra. And then everything else, again, is pretty much just a pinch or so. If you want, after class, you can come up and smell these if you're not familiar with how these different spices taste. I'm going to do a pretty big pinch in each one. For the ginger, I'll just give it a good shake. And a little nutmeg. And then we'll do a little pinch of salt. You can always add more later. Let's see if this is heated up. Slowly but surely. All right, we'll just throw everything in just to hope that we get it all done on time. And I normally wouldn't do this, but I'm going to bring it to boil with the lid on, and I'm just going to watch it carefully. So that's why I wouldn't normally do it, because it can boil over really easily. I don't know if you've ever had oatmeal boil over. It's a big disaster. I've done that so many times, especially in the microwave. If you ever cook oatmeal in the microwave, you know, I think I've tried cooking it in a bowl like this. I just have a little bit in there, but then, you know, you see it like just somehow it gets so big and bubbly. You might maybe even want a bowl bigger than this for one serving, because it just boils like crazy. So anyway, just want to make sure you watch that carefully, but we're not going anywhere, so we can watch this. And let me make sure the beans are still cooking. I think this power cord is unhappy. Let's see if I can do it with my foot. Okay. Maybe there's too many things plugged in. I'll unplug the computer. No, I can't do it with my feet. All right. Well, let's check on our beans. They are starting to thicken a bit, but it hasn't been very hot. Thank you, Min. I think the power cord for the computer, I think it'll be okay. Yeah. Maybe that'll help a little bit. Thank you. Can you see the beans on the overhead?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, they're starting to thicken a bit, but by the time they're done, it should be quite a bit thicker than this. So those honestly still have a way to go, but hopefully you saw what it should look like with the samples. There's still some back there if you want to take a look. If you find that there's too much water and you feel like everything is done, then I would just take the lid off, and that will help some of the water evaporate, and that will help thicken it if you don't want to overcook it, but want to get rid of some of the liquid. Okay, that's doing absolutely nothing, but it is on. The light is on. But meanwhile, all right, I can add some of the vanilla. We can add that.
Do you have to stir oatmeal when you cook it? I've never actually cooked oatmeal on the stove.
I do, yeah. I give it a stir to kind of like check the texture and prevent it from sticking. Oops. But yeah, you can cook it in the microwave too. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is you could also make this as a baked oatmeal. Okay, that is hot. So I don't know if you've seen baked oatmeal recipes or tried it before, but you make it sort of like a casserole. So that's nice for preparing ahead of time. And then, you know, you just bake it in a pan and cut it into little bars or squares, and then you just grab and go. I don't know the exact quantities for if you wanted to do this as baked. You probably want a little bit less liquid, I would imagine, and maybe some kind of binding ingredient like egg, or you can make egg out of flaxseed or chia seed. But there's all kinds of baked oatmeal recipes out there. But I personally don't like that texture quite as much. So I prefer it like this. There's also lots of optional ingredients you could add. So the flax or chia seed, you could add that as a sprinkle on top towards the end for some extra healthy fats and fiber and protein. But because they work as a binding agent, as an egg replacement, that means it's because they become sort of gelatinous. So if you don't want that texture, then don't add them too early in the cooking process. You can also add any of the spices we mentioned. Another one that I don't have that you could try is ground cloves, if you like that flavor. I would probably start with very, very little though. Toasted coconut might be nice as a little crunchy topping. Or you could add something creamy on top that would sort of be like the icing on the carrot cake. So it could be Greek yogurt or cream cheese or plant-based versions of those things. Cream cheese might be a little thick. Maybe you could mix it in with yogurt or something, but that would make it a little extra decadent if you want. I think the cream cheese icing on carrot cake usually has a little lemon in it too. So you probably could throw in a little bit of lemon in this or some lemon zest, or mix it in with the yogurt or the cream cheese to get that kind of citrusy punch. All right, so that's starting to cook, but we're out of time. So that would be done in about 5 minutes or so, but let's end with the raffle. So thank you all for coming. Do you all have your raffle tickets?